Welcome to another episode of Problem Busters, the show where we talk about people who are solving things and we share their good ideas. And of course, I'm here with my co-host, Jonathan. How are you, my friend?
I'm very good. Ollie, how are you?
I not complain. We're almost at the end of lockdown for England, right? So we hope.
Yep, and then it's open doors for Christmas.
And then after Christmas, lock them away again.
That's it.
Strange times.
Cool.
So what are we going to talk about today, my friend?
So today we have a esteemed guest on our hands.
I was going to do the intro, wasn't I?
Yes, you were. That's right.
Did I just put you on the spot a little bit?
Yes, you did. Yes, you
Well,
did. But I'll let you take it away.
Our guest. So we have Hakim Evans coming direct from NYC in the US of A. And Hakim is a youth activist and is part of the Alliance for Climate Education, or ACE. And welcome to the show, mate.
Thanks for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for negotiating the time differences and minor technical difficulties.
Yeah, for anyone listening, it's 5 hours. Don't gotta Google it.
So before we kick off and start talking about the problem that you've been looking to solve and all that good stuff, tell us a little bit about you and perhaps maybe a little bit about how your background might intersect with Jonathan's in some way.
Well, great you asked. So I'm originally from Jamaica, born and raised, and a lot of the climate crisis focuses on that island, but it's not something I paid attention to when I was younger. None of the issues that I really went through in the face of the climate crisis related to me until I moved to New York, and that's when I was 16.
What was it like arriving in the Big Apple, coming from literally a tropical island?
Well, it's not really the average coming to America experience. Even though we share a name, me and Prince Hakim didn't have much in common. So it was really heading into high school, not knowing what I want to do, looking for my passion, what I want to volunteer in, what issue I want to give myself to. And it was originally public health. And that's where I found the intersection to tobacco use and the environment, even though it was on a small scale. Then I furthered up my research with the Alliance for Climate Education. Then I got more experience as to how the climate crisis impacted public health, how it impacted me personally, how it impacted everyone in my community. And especially since I live in Far Rockaway, which is a small peninsula right outside on the tip of New York City. And it faced the brunt of Hurricane Sandy in 2012. And to this day, I have the markers in my house where the flood levels were. And it's significantly high.
I don't actually, I'm ashamed to say, know very much about Hurricane Sandy at all. Do you, Jonathan?
No, other than some of the coverage that was on the news, not very much was sort of highlighted in terms of how it affected real people. It's just kind of on the news. They did the
trees and cars and
the reporter in the rain with an umbrella getting blown about. Just for the bit of a shock value, but it doesn't really say what the long-term effects are. Could you give us a bit more detail on what sort of those long-term effects were in Far Rock?
Sure, but for one, it was a highly politicized hurricane. We had people in Congress before the hurricane saying it's inconceivable that anyone would even suggest that the World Trade Center memorial could be flooded out, and it was un-American to think like that. And then that's what happened. So people were playing politics with people's lives. And to this day, There are homes that are not refurbished. There's still water damage. There are some lots that aren't safe to go on because you can still see the impacts from Sandy. And to those in Far Rockaway, since everyone had to raise their homes, there are some still not raised, and those might handle the brunt of a next climate catastrophe.
Wow. That brings things home, I expect.
Yeah.
I mean, growing up in New Zealand, I'm used to the fact that we started off with what they called a burn time, which would be on the news each night. Tomorrow the burn time is 18 minutes, 12 minutes, 11 minutes, 10 minutes. When it got down beneath 10 minutes, which was about 20 years ago, they stopped mentioning it because I guess they just feel that it would worry people that they would step outside and get sunburned, which is basically how things have become. But I haven't seen that kind of flood event in that way. Jonathan, have you been touched by climate change in London?
London, yes. So in terms of climate crises over the years, I do remember when I was a lot younger, we had a hosepipe ban, because although there is a lot of precipitation in the UK, the wastage of clean drinkable water was at an all-time high. So the government, because there are a number of reservoirs underneath London, and those were actually not getting replenished as quickly as the water was being used. There was I guess not as much precipitation as well. So what was happening is the government actually put a ban on using hose pipes to wash cars and water your lawns and stuff. And that was the very first sort of touch that kind of hit home, because in school they'll teach us, the water levels may rise with regards to the sea levels, but nobody really said, would you experience a drought in the UK, which was really surprising. And the fact that the drinkable water reserves were actually pretty low, well, that was one of the first surprises. I was too really young to understand it, but all I knew is I couldn't wash the car and I couldn't water any plants outside with a hose.
Yeah, right. I mean, I guess Australia is a bit like the US in the sense that it's big enough that you can kind of get a feel for things that are happening at different times in different seasons, kind of at the same time. And
Definitely.
and so there were, you get news reports like I'm sure you've seen, Hakim, where you've got a drought somewhere and a flood somewhere on the same day. And
just like in the US this past summer in September, there was snow in Colorado, so that's like the southwest, and there were wildfires in California, that's far west, and over in New York City, it was just hot, ridiculously hot.
Wow.
Yeah. It kind of raises the thought that maybe something is wrong, doesn't it? So maybe now's a good time to tell us about the problem that caught your attention. I think folks might have got a bit of a suggestion in what it is and why.
Yes, the problem is the climate crisis, but specifically how we can get involved. And this problem is not going anywhere. So to those ignoring it, those being ambivalent, it's a problem. We caused it. We know we caused it, and we have the options to develop solutions to rectify it. Yeah.
And how did you get from public health to there? I mean, you've given us a bit of a feeling for looking at smoking and then the hurricane hitting the city. Bridge that gap for us.
All right. So public health, originally what I was doing was tobacco control. But for broader public health, we realized that, especially in low-income communities who face the brunt of asthma and other respiratory diseases, those affect people, but it's the cause, which is cause for concern. The cause of these respiratory diseases is climate change in general, but specifically pollution, the rapid changes in the atmosphere, not just global warming meaning everything's getting hot. But the fact that we have hot days and we have cold days, and our hot days are going to be extremely hot and our cold days are going to be extremely cold. So it takes out the middle ground of our fluctuating weather patterns through our climate over time. So what we're seeing is more extreme events. So a normal day at the beach isn't going to be so normal under the sun. A cool snow day might end up being a blizzard. And these factors can have detrimental impacts on people's health. And in the US, public health, healthcare has been an issue that we've cared about for so long, and not much being done about it. And the root cause has been environmental changes, which affected people's health. So climate change has negatively impacted people's health. So rectifying climate change and the climate crisis can have a positive impact on people's health.
Mm. Yeah, it's a link that I don't think many people draw, and I think they should, because climate change doesn't affect us equally, does it? And I often feel like when there's a climate event, that in many ways it kind of shines a light on inequality, you know?
Yeah, definitely. And what we see in the US is that those marginalized communities, indigenous groups, people of color, they face the major brunt of the climate catastrophe since they live in the most impacted areas, such as dense cities, close to production plants, where carbon is emitted, where sea levels are rising, where the air quality is just not safe, where coal ash is being dumped on. We realize that it's not just a coincidence, but we have encountered the issue of climate racism, where the most affected people are those who don't have much power or money or influence to fight back.
Yeah, because I think you do see that in places like, is it Flint, Michigan, with the water?
Yep.
That was really highlighted, that disparity. As far as being in New York as well, I see it's one of the major cities in the world, if not probably the most multicultural city in the world at the moment. Again, with this climate racism. So I just want to see how you can touch on that in the areas where there are a lot more and people of color residing. Is it a lot harder for you to try and push your message to how climate change is really affecting them and the effects that it could have on their own health?
I don't think it's really difficult. All you have to do is just take the blinds off people's eyes and they're like, oh, this is happening. But the problem arises when they're like, how can I do something? How can I change my way of life? How can I change what I'm experiencing? And that's where civic engagement comes in. How do we not just get these people educated, but get them activated to take control of how they're living?
Okay.
And that's a lot of the work that organizations like ACE has done with other smaller and larger grassroots organizations to get people to get loud, to get them to hold their elected officials accountable, and to recognize that their current situation can be changed by changing who represents them.
Right. Yeah.
What was the turning point for you? Because it's obviously when reading about your work, it's hard to get more than a paragraph in before Obama comes up. Someone we both have a lot of respect for. Was that a moment? Tell us a bit about that, because I think that might help others work through their own process of, should I get involved? Do you get me?
Well, I won't just say that Obama was the only person I looked up to for guidance on the climate crisis, when truly it was just my personal experience and because I'm a very go with the flow type of person, and when I was going through the issues of public health and the environment, and I'm realizing, whoa, this is damaging my flow. How do I rectify this? So getting educated was the point for me. That was the turning point for me, where I could decide, hey, this is a problem. It affects me. It affects those who I love and care about. Why can't I do something? What can I do? So that was really the point for me. Then after that came the inspirations from people like Obama, John Kerry, Leonardo DiCaprio. Now we have younger youth activists like Kevin Patel, Jamie Margolin, Greta Thunberg, who are doing all these important things that help us to reclaim our future.
Great.
Yeah. Go for it, Jonathan.
No, I was thinking. I was like, oh. Okay. So in terms of for lack of a, well, it's probably the appropriate word is it the sort of the youth activism in regards to the climate crisis? Is there an approach that's going on? Is there like a unified effort in terms of tackling different areas? Are they like rural? Are there sort of do you attack it in a sense that, okay, well, do we focus on cities first and then make our way to rural areas, or is it a case of just we're trying to educate as many people as possible in different places first? Is there a trend you're seeing where change is being impacted more efficiently in different areas of the country in America? Sorry.
Well, I definitely think changes wide sweeping. Every organization, the grassroots organization, have their own target audience. But with the large network of youth that are taking action on climate, we're seeing a wide net being cast in rural areas, suburban areas, cities, indigenous lands. Everyone everywhere is taking some sort of notice on the issue of the climate crisis, and they're speaking out. We're seeing places getting mobilized, they're getting activated, they're taking back control. As we've seen in the current election cycle, we're seeing places have voting trends that are going to make graphs look completely different in the future.
Yeah.
Can you just summarize that for folks who aren't in the US? Because what we see, as you can imagine, in the international media is more personality than policy driven. I think it's fair to say, Jonathan.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I agree to a degree, pun intended. But I think it's because we see on one hand we had Trump, who was very I say boisterous and you know was kind of make America great again and all of the stuff that he brought. And on the other side you have Biden, who I understand has a pretty thorough approach to climate change. Correct me if I'm wrong, Hakim.
Yeah, well, you have someone on the right who has a very populist approach that panders to those who don't accept the climate crisis as an imminent threat. Then you have the guy on the left, Biden. He's had a chippy record. May consider him a centrist, but left of center. But the important thing is that we have pressure groups, progressive pressure groups, ensuring that the incoming president-elect is gonna listen to those who voted for him, especially those who cared about the climate crisis.
Is that a change from previous elections that you've observed?
Could you clarify that for me?
Yeah, sure. So what I was thinking is that I know that when Obama was elected, there was a real moment in sophistication and getting organized and the campaign. It felt like global campaigning had changed at that moment for me. And then I saw Trump come in, and then as we moved into this election, I feel like Biden was suddenly talking about things due to pressure groups who may not have had a voice in previous elections as much. Do you see what I mean? Compared to big industry lobby, for example.
That's very true, because that's who whipped up a lot of the votes for him. With Biden's campaign, there was a lot of pressure from environmental groups, mainly because we have those in Congress that are very progressive, have very progressive ideals, and they come from places that Biden needed to ensure his victory. So they represent a bulk of these grassroots organizations, and what needs to be done by Biden and the Democratic Party as a whole for these areas who face the brunt of the climate crisis, like Michigan, or states Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and even Georgia, where they face adverse climate catastrophes impending in coming years.
Yeah. So what's your feeling for the short term? I know a lot of activists and pressure groups in the UK have changed their approach as a result of what you might call a populist leader coming into power here. And I kind of imagine that the moment you are having might be, let's turn the page because we now have an opportunity to get some different work done. Is that what you're feeling and seeing within ACE?
Well, we're still not sitting back easy, because not just because Biden won the election, even though some are trying to dispute it. That's not a reason to sit back, because the country hasn't really shifted left, because that depends on two important races that we have in the upper house of Congress. Those two Senate seats will decide who really controls the government, or if we have a divided government. So we're not out of the woods yet. We still might have to do some more pressuring, some more activism work. And so our election isn't over until we get those results after January 5th. So no activist group is sitting by. We're not breathing a sigh of relief yet, but we can see some work is going to be done from the executive branch, and we're going to see how much can get done, and we're going to push to see if we can get our demands met without Congress, if we have those two seats lost.
It's just amazing, isn't it, Jonathan, that an election could go for so long, especially after the primaries and the secondaries, and it almost feels like a continuous election cycle.
Very much so.
Yeah, I think it's one of the I guess the blessings or a curse of well, it's not really a curse, but the blessings of of democracy, right? Where even when somebody has won, you can still dispute it, right? You can still say, "Hold on, let's check it again, just to confirm."
Yeah, and he's checking again.
He's checking again, yeah.
And nobody expected anything else, right? Because
Exactly.
if populists are anything, they're predictable once they see the way things are leaning, right?
Right.
That's it. Yeah, that's it. In terms of the work that ACE is doing, I'm under the impression that it's well, again, with the climate crisis, it's a more of a long-term plan and a long-term gain. So, could you sort of speak on how you see the future working with ACE's work with reaching young people, and what benefits you see in the long term with educating a lot more young people at the rate that ACE is doing now?
Yeah, definitely. So our long game for the climate justice movement as a whole is a just and equitable transition to renewable energy without disparaging anyone else. So we want to see young people get educated and activated, do what they will with that information to ensure a future where we are not dependent on dirty energy, where we're not dependent on elected officials who don't listen to what we have to say. And we make sure that all intersections of climate justice are realized, because there's no climate justice without racial justice or justice for women, justice for workers. It's an intersectional issue where we have to look at everyone who's being impacted and go to the youth in those groups, since youth are the future, and educate them to the point where we'll have a posterity that is just and equitable for everyone.
Wow. Yeah. See, this is why I love the work that you're doing, because you're not just focusing on one thing. It's like you're looking at the causes as well. So the morality with regards to clean renewable energy spans through to society and the morality amongst each other as well. So I really support that. I like that.
Yeah, me too. It just feels like we're not just focusing on one thing, because that after a while leads to that moment when people sort of say, yeah, but I live a normal life, right?
Yeah. And we need to remember that, especially in activism, that some people have lives to live. They can't follow it to the T because we come from different backgrounds, different socioeconomic backgrounds. Everyone can't afford to drink hemp milk and just have a nice, merry day.
I feel like Jonathan's looking at me and my oat milk habit. Barista only. Thanks very much.
Your chai soy lattes. I love it.
But it's a fair point, right? Because I think a really interesting debate in the climate justice debate is, whose fault is it? Is it the developing world or the developed world, or is there something in between? And I find both sides really interesting, right? Because Europe and to an extent North America might say, yeah, I mean, we've polluted a lot, but look how much we're cleaning it up. We're really ahead of the game. Look at you, China, India, Africa. You guys are just, look how much you're polluting. You need to clean up your act, or you can't trade in our block. But then the other side is, well, fair enough, but you guys have been polluting for hundreds of years, and we're just trying to get clean drinking water.
The blame game is so consistent with major powers.
Mm.
It's so it's a comfortable approach for them. Developed countries are saying, "Oh, we're cleaning up." Large developed countries who are not so big on cleaning up, still using dirty energy, they're saying, "Oh, we're not as bad." Developing countries are blaming large powers, saying, "Oh, you did this and we're facing the brunt for it," but still allowing those countries to exploit their natural resources. It's a pointing game that's just convenient for everybody. And what we have to do is take a large approach with developed countries at the helm to cut their emissions by large amounts and to use funding from transitioning to a more profitable energy system to help out developing countries who are facing the brunt of the climate catastrophe and who are going to be facing the brunt of even worse catastrophes that we can expect in the future. So this has to be a coordinated attempt on a global level.
Yeah. Have you seen any examples of that you could share?
None comes to mind right now.
Which means it's cutting edge. You heard it here first from Hakim.
You're right. So get on it, guys. Work with adopt a developing country.
Yeah, that's it.
Well, maybe we could take one a little bit closer to home. Do you want to tell us about NY Renews, the coalition, and the push for wind energy? Because I have to admit, the Big Apple and wind energy didn't come to mind for me, you know?
Yeah, so I've been paying very close attention to New York State's offshore wind master plan. And originally when the plan just came out in, I believe, 2017, the plan was to have 45% of the state's energy come from offshore wind. And I'm like, 45%? And at the hearings, you're hearing how much government red tape they would need that would take about 10 years to clear through. So I'm like, why don't you just do 100%? So synonymously, New York Renews, a coalition of grassroots organizations that care about the environment, was looking to pass the Climate and Community Protection Act. And we've been trying to do this for a while. It's included lobbying elected officials, unseating them at the state level, and eventually passing this bill that would ensure a just and equitable transition to renewable energy. And what we've seen is that it's cohesively putting the state's plan on track to widen how much wind energy they will use. So this actually benefits more people by forcing the state to actively utilize more resources than doing it little by little. That was probably a point to pander to conservatives. So what we're seeing is the state taking action based on a successful grassroots effort to ensure that people have the option for clean energy. And especially in New York State, where we have New York City, the city that never sleeps, being powered by renewable energy. That's something to look forward to. And I think that's something the world would welcome.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that makes my hands tingle. It's to see a major industrial powerhouse and commercial powerhouse and financial powerhouse like New York move forward really feels like it would pave the way for others, right, Jonathan?
Definitely.
Yeah.
So let's take the other side of things. You were involved in the ratification of the Paris Climate Agreement, right? Or at least you were in the room and in the youth circle side of it, right?
In the room.
What was that like? I mean, you are probably one of two people I've ever met who have even been in the same room with someone like Obama. So what was that? What did that feel like? Did it feel like we are moving forward?
All right. So quick, clear the air. Obama wasn't in the room. He sent John Kerry as his representative. He was probably still in the hotel. He probably just didn't want to see me. But it's all good, Obama.
You got over it. Now that's big.
Yeah, I'm over it. So in that moment, I was one of two young people in the room, like young. I was 17 at the time, 16 or 17 at the time. And that was when I realized, hey, there's not a lot of people that seem to be around my age group taking part in this and witnessing like a momentous occasion where we'd see the ratification of the Paris Agreement that would go into force in 3 months' time. It was a beautiful process where I saw almost all the world leaders taking action, making commitments, and the brunt of it was when the US pulled out. But focusing on the ratification of the Paris Agreement, that day I had a meeting with some, at the time, the Minister of the Environment for the UAE, which is very interesting because, oil
Yeah.
and stuff.
But also desalination and solar and electric cities.
Yeah. So we had a conversation with some of their international students from the UAE and the role that youth have to play. And it was clear that youth can be a successful pressure group. And that, I think, was a foreshadowing moment for the US pulling out of the Paris Agreement, because we saw the localities step up and youth activist groups and grassroots organizations step up.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
sorry, Jonathan, you go.
Oh no, I was saying it is quite interesting actually, because when I was at university about 10 years ago, a number of I did civil engineering, which of course is all about building structures and engineering in a lot of oil companies. So we had a lot of people from the UAE studying in my class, and their fathers used to work for these big oil companies, and they were tasked to pretty much learn about sustainable construction, which was quite interesting. So a lot of the learnings they did was all on sustainability, and I found that were quite interesting, that the foresight to have your young people trained up on on learning skills of which that you as a parent are not going to use anymore. Right? It's like a coal miner sending their child to do programming, if that makes sense. So, yeah, I was just thinking that the foresight is quite interesting, especially when you're producing a lot of oil. That to think, all right, the youth and the pressure groups and just having the foresight to say, okay, well, we actually need to make a start on change. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And that's one of our goals for having a just and equitable transition to renewable energy. Because remember, we have all these coal plants, we have all these dirty energy facilities. These can't be shut down overnight. And displacing their workers is a non-starter, because we want to make sure they have something to live for, they have something to do when the coal industry is no longer profitable to anyone. So that's why skills training, jobs training, a new generation of people who will take the helm of the renewable energy industry. And that may include the sons and daughters of coal workers and mine workers.
Yeah, and that, I mean, that's fascinating to me as someone who's lived in two different British colonies, right, at one time. New Zealand and Australia's towns, I think we can say, outside of the commercial centres, are where primary industry was based, right? And I think a lot of parts of England have towns that have developed around rigs and mines and things like that too, right?
Yeah.
But I know the States definitely, and Canada definitely, right? And so what happens to a group of people in a place like in Tasmania on the west coast, and I think it's called Zealand, and I turned up in my van and I'm driving around and I'm like, how are you all doing? What's happening? And I parked up in this car park, and these guys next to me said, do you mind if we have a bonfire near your van? Is that all right? It's about 20 meters away. And I was like, sure. And I was thinking, wow, this guy looks like he's on tough times, right? I'm just going to say yes to whatever, although he seems like a good guy. And the thing that got me worried was that this bonfire was doors and windows. And so I wandered over and I talked to them and I said, why are you burning doors and windows? Because you could say what you want in Australia, which is kind of nice. And the guy said, because we're tearing down the empty houses because they've been there for 20 years since the mines shut, and we need something to burn, and that's just rubbish. And I realized that if we don't have something for people to do, then we can't shut down what they might be doing, right? It's not, they didn't necessarily get a job at the plant because they didn't care about the environment, right? They got a job because they needed a job. So what you say really rings true to me.
Yeah.
So as far as the political aspect of it now, Because I'm sure the pressure groups are getting more and more involved, and that angle seems to be quite successful, because I'm sure if I was a politician today and I was coming into power, I don't want to be responsible for losing hundreds of thousands of jobs because I've brought in sustainable energy too quickly. And I've sort of, all these coal miners are now out of business, and I'm going to get blamed, and it's just going to be a whole PR mess. In terms of the political aspect, and that sort of changeover, are you seeing that changeover take effect in industry? I mean, first one that jumps is kind of Tesla, I believe, where they're trying to make a change. Do you see that movement moving from old energy to sort of sustainable energy for plants in different industries, other than the car?
Well, definitely, because most of these companies, not just Tesla, are most of the ones who are still using gasoline. They're including hybrid functions on their newer models. They're trying to go electric as well. So no one wants to rush and jump out of dirty energy so quickly, but they're trying to test out the waters for renewable energy. So it's a transitional phase, you could say, that might take some time, but there is an industry shift. And in regards to a political shift, that's mainly taking place at the state levels. Even conservative states are taking action on climate change. Even if they don't say it outright, they might say, oh, let's make our air and water cleaner. Let's make things more sustainable. They'll dance around the idea of climate change, just like how we dance around the idea of welfare. Everyone wants to have a social safety net, but no one wants to say the word welfare or want to be a welfare state. So I think that's where we're coming to, and I think the U.S. can find common ground on the idea of making the environment better for everyone.
I find that really fascinating as well, that what we see on the tin, if you like, in terms of the national brand, is perhaps one message, and then on the ground, people are actually getting involved and just quietly getting it done.
Yeah.
What about, can you talk about, after the Paris Climate Agreement was ratified, there's been this movement in youth justice, right? And climate justice for youth. Can you just talk about what it was like being involved in that and seeing these movements? A lot of them come from NYC, but across the world, and seeing people like Greta start to organize things. What was it like being part of that?
All right. So if I could show you a graph, it would start with the Paris Agreement ratification being a high point, then go to November, and it was still relatively high because that's when it went into force. And then November 9th, you all know it went downhill for everyone who cared about environmental justice, because that's when we got the results of the 2016 election. Then fast forward to March and April, we saw movements growing and budding. We saw organizations like This Is 0 Hour starting to bud. We saw Fridays for Future, Greta, starting to come in much later. We saw everyone listening, starting to care about this issue. So it was a long phase of a plethora of emotions that we just had to take in and experience. And it was a wild ride, I'm not going to lie. And there were some crazy moments, especially when I look back at the 2018 Global Climate Action Summit, where youth from all over were called in and brought in, and it was pretty much just for show. At an international conference of that magnitude, youth were really much disenfranchised and just brought there as arm candy, basically. And we saw the negative side of the climate movement, of where those who are wealthy and want the accolades just show their true colors. And after that, it gave youth some thought to be more upfront and take control of the movement.
Yeah. So do you feel like things started to move when people started to organize and, what's the phrase, civil disobedience started to be seen?
Well, I wouldn't say there was much civil disobedience, but there was a wide array of civic engagement. So, like, not everyone was jumping out there at Trump Tower to get arrested, but there were a lot of peaceful demonstrations, and a lot of people put their money where their mouth is and supported a lot of youth causes, including the climate movement. So money we saw as not just like the root of all evil, but we saw it as a tool where, hey, the lobbyists, the industry insiders are pumping money into all these negative campaigns. Why don't we just gather the average Joe and the average Mary Sue and have them chip in and help us for a noble cause?
Yeah. I think Dave Chappelle said it the best, right? He says money is gives you more decisions, so you can make more decisions. It's not necessarily it's not a maker or breaker. It just allows you to make more decisions because you have more things available at that point. So yeah, it makes sense.
So what would you say to a younger you if you looked back now and you were at that point of thinking, I think it's public health, but there's this kind of link with climate. Can I even do anything about that? That seems big and scary. What would you say?
So everyone always makes these messages to their younger self. And I'm like, your younger self would be like, who are you? What? That makes no sense. Younger me would not understand a word older me is saying. I really grew from that point. And the only thing I could say to my younger self was just be open to the idea. Just be open to new ideas, to new trains of thought. My very way of thinking was different at that time compared to now. So that's all I could say. Just be open to new ideas.
Yeah, I think that's really reasonable because, you know, I didn't listen to anybody when they were older than me. You know, when you said that you were thinking about these things at 17, I just think, wow, I was such a late bloomer in that sense. And I come from an environmental family, right, in terms of science. And at 17, I was thinking, I wonder if I'm going to make it to 21, right? Yeah. And listening to The Offspring and going surfing. And, you know, if Hakim had turned up and said, we need to talk about the climate, I would have been like, dude, I wear sunscreen.
I guess that's what the work that ACE does. I guess that ties into that because you essentially have younger selves talking to younger selves at that point, just kind of trying to relay the message over through young people to young people, because it's a completely different language. Even if you look at hip hop from the old school to now, it's just completely. It's not foreign, but it is a lot different. So yeah.
Also it's very different when your peers are doing it, because when I was doing the public health work, and there was one day I had my school do a town hall, and I was getting awarded by 2 local elected officials, and everyone was like, huh? Wait, we can do this? So no, it's a real thing, because at a young age, you're thinking, yeah, that's not for me. Maybe when I'm older, sure. But at this point in my life, wait, he's doing it. I could do it too. And that's really how young people think.
Yeah, that's amazing.
So what would you say to parents when they're sitting at home and their kids ask the normal questions about why have we wrecked the world, what would you say to them?
Well, kids nowadays are asking their parents, hey, we're in an existential crisis. What do you think we should do about it? And parents are like, huh? So parents can really just help educate their kids. Like, I saw it closely with the March for Our Lives, when that movement was really taking the US by storm, and a lot of parents had to have the conversation with their kids. So when their kids were like, hey, I'm gonna march, a lot of parents had to be like, hey, why do you want to march? Why is it important to you? And especially parents of color, they ensure that their kids pass the test. Like, hey, you gotta know what you're marching for, what you're standing for, and why do you even want to do it? If you can't give me a good answer, you're staying home. So parents really need to and not just shoot down the ideas of their kid, because if that was the case, what if Greta's parents were like, you want to do what? Nah, stay home. You got homework to do. We would lose like a lot of influence for the movement. So even if parents don't exactly understand what young people are trying to do, there can be ways that they can support, even if they don't agree. Like if you have conservative parents and the climate crisis might be a very liberal idea to you, you still want to support a noble cause that your child is taking up. Like, so I think it's important for parents to just be a support group for kids, because activism is already a stressful field.
How does that relate to the things that Gabriel's starting to ask you, Jonathan? He's quite young, right? So he probably hasn't said, Dad, why don't we move away from coal energy? But you would get the concept a lot more than I suspect.
Yeah, I think right now he wants to be an astronaut, so he's asking. He knows all the planets and the and this is actually sort of around what Hakim was saying about getting educated. We were saying all the planets, and when I was growing up, one of the planets was Pluto. And it's no longer a planet, or it's what I think they call them a dwarf planet now.
Yeah.
And he was saying, he goes, but Daddy, that's not a planet. It's a dwarf planet. And he started saying Haumea and Makemake and all the other ones. And I was like, oh. So knowing me, straight onto the old YouTube and into the Wikipedia, had to learn all these other planets. And so, it's really have to get educated and stay one step ahead, because the world is changing so fast. And when young people look towards an elder person, whether it be their parent or a family friend or grandparent or uncle or auntie, it's usually for... you're usually their first reference of what's real in the real world, what's going on out there. So if you can learn as much as you can and relay the information and support and understand, I think that makes for an easier transition and an easier, because you can help mold their mind into a more moral person based on the input you give them at that age. So. He hasn't asked me about the coal yet, but I'm just waiting for that nuclear energy. I'm waiting for that coal and waiting for the oil. And to a degree, I think people like Hakim and Ace really, for the parents that have no way of getting that message. So if I'm working in the factory all day and I don't really have the answers, or I don't have time, it really does help to at least try and push your child towards these organizations who can actually provide a lot of the answers if you can't.
Yeah, what from your experience, Hakim, how would you suggest that people can get their children involved in a healthy way in learning and in the debate?
Yeah, so I think parents don't really want their kids going to like Greenpeace's website, but they would really like some important tools. So I think that's why there's some safe organizations to get your child educated, like ACE, which has a feature called Or Climate or Future, which is an animated short that basically gives you a breakdown of climate science, which when I just started ACE, I was getting a look at not this, but an in-person experience with climate science and getting knowledgeable on it. So I think even going to NASA's website to find some information on climate science, even though with this administration the term science and a lot of things related to climate were removed, but most of the facts still remained on government websites. So you can't hide all the science.
Mm.
And with this incoming administration, that's definitely going to be one of the things to look forward to. So science will return to the helm of science, and we won't just be winging it. So parents with kids can definitely turn to, well, I can't say like scholarly journals and articles, but definitely might be a bit of a marketing tool. But head over to ACE's website and get some of that information.
Yeah. Cool. We'll put that in the show notes for sure. And I particularly like Our Climate, Our Future. I think that's a good one. So that'll be in there too. Tell us, what are some of the things that you're looking forward to in terms of the movement, in terms of the US and what's happening there, and more broadly in terms of the way the world is changing?
I'm looking forward to like who will actually develop an entire country, a large country that has the capability to run on 100% renewable energy, have zero waste, ensure a sustainable ecosystem is developed, and ensuring posterity for younger generations. I want to see who can do that. And developing countries, I want to see which of them, and I hope all of them, enter a place where they can be sustainable and improve the quality of life, especially in sub-Saharan Africa. I'm looking there to the future.
And what an amazing place for innovation as a group of countries, right? I haven't had the pleasure yet, but I've certainly spoke to some folks who have, and you know, the amazing, the inventiveness that comes from necessity, right?
Yeah. Wait, were you asking me
No. I was
question?
I was thinking about fish
simmer
leather.
on the point. Yeah, I think sub-Saharan Africa is one of the unique places in the world where they're developing at such a rate that you're in a sort of a fork in the road, that if you do take the sustainability route, you can still build out a lot of sustainable infrastructure for future generations. Whilst if you don't, and you go the standard route that I guess a lot of Western countries did over the past hundreds of years, you will sort of lock your way into that path as well. So it's quite an interesting place. Really, really interesting. A lot of development happening there, a lot of resources, because it's all on your doorstep as well. So, yeah,
Totally.
really interesting.
So let's, now I'm conscious of your time, Hakim, and thanks for being so generous with it. Is there anything that you would like to promote beyond ACE in terms of books or films or organizations that you think deserve looking into?
Well, maybe I should start with the I Am Greta documentary that I should take a look into. I want to get a look into that. I also want to talk about a film that inspired me, even because since I was born in 98.
Oh, you're so young, it's amazing.
I didn't know the impact that Al Gore's An Inconvenient Truth had on like the general populace. So that's why when I watched an inconvenient sequel, I'm like, oh, this was interesting, because to anyone who didn't have knowledge of the climate crisis, but to someone who does, I still didn't realize the magnitude and the scale of how much it was a problem. But I think Greta's documentary, which I haven't watched yet, should highlight some of the youth voices that are integral to the climate justice movement. So that's what I'm pushing to watch. Also a book by my good friend Jamie Margolin, the director and founder of This Is 0 Hour. She has a book out, Youth to Power. I'll try to get to reading that as well.
Awesome.
Yeah, and I think that's it for books and films that I should get on.
Awesome. Thank you. Jonathan, do you have anything else on the tip of your tongue? Or should we thank Hakim for his time?
Oh, also, I want
What? There's more.
There we go.
Yep, there's more. I want to make sure like everyone knows whatever background, age, ability, you have a part to play in the environmental justice movement, whether it be marching. If you can't march, you can fund organizations. If you can't fund organizations, you can support them on social media. If you don't have social media, have your kids show you, or your neighbor's kid. Get educated, get activated, and help someone.
Oh, fantastic. That was my question. I was like, what can a normal person do? Like, what can an everyday person do? Yeah. So, again, thank you very much, Hakim. We appreciate offering your time and your experiences.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I mean, thank you. That's it's been inspiring, and yeah, I just feel grateful to be able to share the story of what you've experienced in the States with people all over the world. So thank you. And folks, thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and follow Jonathan all over social media because he's famous. just wanted to hear your nervous laugh. It's been a pleasure, folks. And Hakim, I hope that you are a sign of Congress people to come.
Ooh, maybe.
Cheers. Cheers. Bye.
Bye, everyone.